Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us here today for our teleconference on the new reality. My name is Ria Dark, and I'm very fortunate to be joined here today by Megan Kuhar, a branding strategies coach. Hannah, can you tell me how to pronounce your last name, please? I should have asked you ahead of time.
Sure, it's Schlueter.
Thank you. And she's a leader at LaunchNet. We're going to hear all about that. And Tim Marshall, the director of Digital Marketing Clinic. They're all here today to share some of the trends in business to help you evolve in your career path and even embarking on a new one. So, we were kind of speaking with the guests earlier, we were talking about how, there's a lot of pivots that we've all made in our lifetimes, and even in this current climate, we see this happening, but the difference is that there's a lot of uncertainty, right? There's no clear path ahead. But what we do know is that if we want to be successful, we definitely need to adopt a very optimistic outlook that we can do this and that we can generate these opportunities, but certainly optimism in and of itself doesn't make things happen. So the other things that we want to do is really talk about some very concrete and specific things that you can do. For those of you who are joining us here today, also, we are also live streaming on YouTube. So for those of you not in the GoToMeeting, you're participating here through YouTube through live stream. And we're also live streaming on Keynote Live, part of our presentation. And you can see there a little bit more of the backgrounds of our guests here. And also some of our student staff who have worked really hard to also be a part of this evolving process. So yeah, thank you everyone who keeps joining us. And so I'm going to get started on some key points. One of the things that we want to understand is that there is a distressing trend out there. We are seeing a shift from hiring, marketing, where job seekers have the upper hand in the past. Now we see companies have more of that power, unfortunately. Job seekers will likely have to settle for lower salaries than expected, and negotiating will be key. So one area where you can negotiate, where you're going to see some of that, is perhaps seek stock options or other elements that may bolster the total compensation package, or some ideas that we can keep in mind. And then some other things that you might be thinking about are, what are some desirable characteristics that employers are going to be looking for? Telecommuting is going to be a part of this new reality. There's no way around that. So employers are going to be looking for people who have a proven track record of working remotely, right, with minimal supervision. So it's important for us to be independent, to be able to demonstrate that we're tech savvy. Obviously, most of us are, but some of us maybe not as much as others. For example, I neglected to turn off the audio for people coming in and out of this conference, so that's going to be something I have to live with, but it's a learning experience, so we keep going. And as job seekers, we need to get up to speed on this required tech as quickly as possible, as well as emphasizing skills that are essential to working remotely. Strong communication, organization, and responsibility and discipline. Absolutely, we have to have that discipline. So some other trends that we're seeing in the job market, and here I'm just giving an overall view before we talk to the actual experts about all of these items. Companies what companies are being utilized and growing. We want to see who's growing during this pandemic. What organizations appear to be immune to the effects of the recession or quarantining. So it's important for job seekers to apply strategically, right? Don't apply for work or professional sports team, right? We see all sports are currently at indefinite hiatus. Look for companies that are providing some of the creative, innovative solutions for the needs that we have here today. So preparation is key. Job seekers must have all relevant applications materials prepared ahead of time. So you really have to stand out against the crowd, and also to, even the negotiations, prove that you have value. And so apply promptly, make sure everything's polished, stay up to date with the companies and the industries of relevance to you, because there's going to be a lot of evolution going on moving forward in the job market, lots of gaps that, again, we're not aware of right now. So this is why it's important for us to know what's going on and really stay abreast. So it's important for us to do that. Okay, so here today we're going to talk to Hannah, to Megan. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So Hannah, since you're already here, how about you could tell us a little bit about you know, what can people do and, you know, how can they try to find work during this downturn?
Sure. So just some really brief background on me. The program I run again is Launch It, as you mentioned, and I work a lot with student and alumni entrepreneurs. So my advice, you know, in this economic downturn is sometimes you got to create the work yourself. There are lots of opportunities to look for new positions, but if there's something that you're really passionate about, maybe a side hustle you've been considering starting, and if you are somebody who's been furloughed, perhaps laid off, or maybe you just have more time on your plate in general because you don't have that commute, starting a side hustle is a great way to at least start pursuing additional revenue. And there's tons of resources for entrepreneurs in Northeast Ohio alone to help get you started on that idea. There's also things like Upwork.com, Fiverr.com, where you could do some freelance work. You can also sort of look into some of this gigging economy. I know that me and my friends really take advantage of Instacart, and I'm sure they're always looking for drivers. Might not be the career path you want for forever, but certainly a great way to find some additional income until something more solid comes along.
And not to mention, you know, one of the points that was made in the presentation was, you know, you need to demonstrate that you can be independent, that you are able to work remotely. You know, and some of those, the gig economy that you're talking about, some of those things like Instacart, these are things that you do on your own and that you are doing, you know, to demonstrate that you can command, because, you know, it's the app, you have to be able to source it and be able to manage those communications. So that also allows you to develop some of those skills and demonstrate that you have them for employers moving forward. So that's a great suggestion in terms of how to find work. One of the other things that you mentioned was to innovate. So I know, tell me a little bit about LaunchNet and tell me a little bit about, you know, some of those innovations that you may be thinking. I mean, maybe we don't know exactly what those are, but maybe if you can give us like an idea of that direction.
Sure. So just a little bit more background on the program. It's LaunchNet. It's a regional collegiate program for entrepreneurs. Baldwin Wallace is one of 5 schools that is funded by the Burton D. Morgan Foundation to provide confidential venture coaching to students and alumni to start something. So they can receive coaching. We also have idea competitions or other lecture series throughout the year where students and alums can hear from entrepreneurs about different industries, about starting something. As far as the innovation process goes, I think, you know, it's all about identifying gaps, right? So if you're in a current role and you've noticed that, hey, there's a better way to do this, and maybe you've been trying to push forward those changes, but they haven't been going through, that could be an opportunity where you start to pursue it on your own. So, you know, when you're talking about innovation, it's all about what you're paying attention to. And it might not be related to your current job. There could be something outside of, you know, in your personal life that you've noticed where there's a gap. You know, obviously with COVID-19, there's been things like where do you get masks or how can you protect yourself if they're not available, right? What other solutions are there? So there's plenty of opportunities, even in a normal environment, to look for different potential gaps and places to make ventures happen.
Right, and you know, some of, and big companies are doing it too. So, you know, we can, you know, we see like a Google Meet, and now we're seeing Zoom and things like that. I mean, and that doesn't mean that you can't even do that in a better way, right? So I'm sure, like you said, you have to really kind of think about, now, what are some ways that you think that, you know, and then we'll move on from this question, but, you know, what are some ways that you think that people can, like when you want to get inspired, right? You take in, you gather information, you let it percolate. So, and then you get the inspiration. So what are some places that you think people can go? Like maybe if you have some, specific suggestions of where people can go to just kind of, kind of how like, they have these bots that scrape the internet and gather information. What are some places that people can scrape some of that information so they can just take it all in and then suddenly have that idea? Do you have any suggestions?
Sure. So you mean as far as like if they're looking for a place to research the information or people to talk to about what they found?
And yeah, I mean, like places where people can go to take, start paying attention to what's coming out of these outlets, And then perhaps that's where their inspiration for innovation might come from, other than, of course, just the powers of observation. But are there places that you would recommend that people should pay, kind of turn their antennas towards and pay attention to?
Sure. So, again, it's going to depend on your own interest. But certainly, social media, whether you love it or hate it, is a great opportunity to learn about new trends. There's tons of pages, groups, communities, forums that you can be a part of to be on the forefront of finding out how things are evolving. Before even the pandemic, I know blockchain was at the forefront of everybody's mind, right? So what did I do? I went out and I joined a couple of blockchain groups just so I could be informed about how that's evolving in our community. So if there's specific interests that you have, there's tons of ways to plug in online, whether it's through Facebook or things even as simple as Quora.com, where you can ask questions around certain things and get responses from people. You might not always find an expert, but you might find some people who know an expert or who have worked in the field for several years or have other resources you can tap into.
Okay, those are really great suggestions. Thank you very much. All right, so let's kind of move on. Tim, maybe you could help us. I mean, you're kind of in the the digital marketing and things like that. So how can a person market themselves so that they can get recruited now with this economy being bad? So what are some ways, Tim, that you think that people could, potentially market themselves?
Sure. So I think that putting in place some digital marketing principles to your job search, no matter what your background, is going to be very important. Certainly using LinkedIn more than ever is critical. And what we have to remember about social media platforms like LinkedIn, any social media app is really just a search engine for people, a search engine for brands. And search engines need keywords. So now is a great time to take a look at your LinkedIn profile, to Google your name and see what comes up, to sort of examine your entire digital presence, see what's there, and more importantly, see what's not there. Did you have a major accomplishment that isn't searchable, that doesn't come up in a search? And how can you construct a digital presence that really informs that hiring manager everything they need to know about you and why they should hire you? It's interesting, if you use the jobs tab on LinkedIn, there could be a job that has that's almost an exact match for your current position. And LinkedIn may tell you that you're only a 20% match because that job description is using specific keywords that aren't found in your profile. So you might be the best candidate for that position, but your language, the words that you've used, the sort of digital breadcrumb trail that you've left just doesn't speak to it. So it's really important to keep an eye on employers and what they're looking for. Understand the language that they're using in their position descriptions and create resume and job search materials that use that exact same language. I'm in digital marketing, but if there's a position that refers to that field as e-marketing or online media development, that's the language they're using. I need to speak to that as well. So really understanding what employers are looking for, and also understand what's happening in your specific industry right now. I think we're all poised for some sort of pivot, but what's happening in your local community? Are there opportunities? Are there challenges that existed prior to COVID-19? A major nonprofit institution in the area reorganized its marketing division and let go about 40 senior marketing professionals about a year ago, replaced them with 20 entry-level marketing positions. So we've had sort of a deficit in marketing jobs at the mid and senior levels for about a year now going into this. So understand the context of what's happening in your industry locally or regionally. That's important. And then try to address those trends in your job search materials too.
So a couple questions. One, did they get rid of their senior levels because they were out of touch with what was going on right now?
So I think that organizations, particularly with regard to marketing, revisit their approach. So if we're talking about a national organization, a regional organization that has multiple offices across the US, what's the structure? Is there one central marketing unit that makes the decisions for the entire global footprint? Or does each office, each regional headquarters get to be in control of its own marketing? And this was an organization that had more of that distributed approach with marketing professionals spread out throughout the geography. And they decided to rein that back in and have a central marketing unit. But some organizations at the same time were doing the exact opposite. So it really changes. That's why it's important in general for you to be aware of what's happening in your industry and keep tabs on your dream employer. You know, follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on social, subscribe to all of their material, really understand what's happening there, because there could be an opportunity that's not circulated on any other job portal except their own website. So you do have to find yourself blocking out time in your schedule. If you're job searching right now, treat it like a job. Give yourself to-dos to reach out as much as you kind of sit back and take information in.
And so I want to go back to some of the beginning points that you made. You know, you're right. It is critical to spend time developing your profile, you know, because that's the algorithm that's generated. That's the thing that comes your way in terms of, so it's not just like, it's all, I mean, it's also the things that you're saying, but also who you're following, what your interests are, you know, all of those titles, even putting in some of your volunteer experience. You know, it's important to take the time, and that's your current resume, really. I mean, you know, no one's going to really look at that. They're going to look at LinkedIn, and you can even generate a resume from LinkedIn that really looks fairly polished. And then, you know, personally, I can speak to that. So, you know, I was working in, you know, emotional intelligence, and you know, of course, I was doing a mental health, but not like officially mental health. You know, I was talking about wellness, but you know, mental health. I noticed that was becoming so huge. I was like, wait a minute. I need to talk about what I am doing does address mental health. And you know, for me, my career path has, you know, completely developed in a direction, you know, doing continuing education units now, you know, creating content for organizations was something that I wasn't doing before because I was more focused on something else, but this is the need now. You know, I'm more focused now on doing that. And that's, you know, you're absolutely right. And that's brought me great success. So one of the other things that you mentioned was, you know, some of the keywords that, you know, and things that people might be looking for. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing now of, you know, keywords that people might want to think that I need to include this in my profile? So do you have any suggestions for that?
It's always good to be as specific as possible. So if you have a background in social media, what exactly does that mean? It will be valued a lot more if you were to say that you managed an Instagram business account, that you have done paid media advertising on Facebook, that you've used Google search ads as opposed to just listing digital marketing. So you want to be as specific as possible to really help that hiring manager understand what your skill set is. And I would extend that advice to everyone, no matter your field. So if you work in sales, be descriptive. Were you inside sales? Were you a traveling sales rep? Were you a sales engineer who provided demonstrations of technology applications? The more information you can provide, the better. And it really helps that person from the outside looking in understand what your skill set is. What's challenging about marketing ourselves is that we know our story. Right? So when we see a keyword, when we look at a past position description, we know what that meant. But somebody from the outside looking in, they're not going to understand that context. They don't have that background. So be as explicit as possible to really show what you do.
I love it. And can you tell us a little bit about your company and what the work that you do?
So I work at Baldwin-Wallace University alongside Hannah, and I'm an assistant professor in the marketing program. But I also have a great opportunity to be the director of the Digital Marketing Clinic. So we are a full-service digital marketing agency, which just happen to be based at a university. Businesses reach out to us who have any range of digital marketing or marketing communications and digital transformation needs. And I build a team of students to be their agency of record for a semester or a year or on an ongoing permanent basis. So it's actually been really exciting because we pretty much work in a virtual co-op model. So even before most universities shifted online, we were pretty much working virtually too. We were able to continue our work really without missing a beat, but each of our clients had a pivot. So we were in a fluid flexible, operations plan leading up to this, and it let us be there for our clients that really had to make some severe changes and make some tough choices during this time.
Right. Right. Also, thanks. I mean, I love the idea of being specific and being very clear, so that you telling your story using specific keywords and just like really drilling down. It's not just marketing. You were just doing Google ads or this that. I love that. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Okay, so Megan, I'd like to hear from you now. So I want to talk about the value of networking. Like, so you're a brands coach, brand manager. So in this environment, Megan, how does someone network? How do we, how does someone, used to be networking events and things of that nature. So, Megan, if you could kind of share with us, what is the value of networking and how we can do that in this current environment where there's a bunch of social distancing going on?
Sure. So I too work at Baldwin Wallace, so I just wanted to. So what I would say with networking that is really interesting is that just because we're not able to be face to face doesn't mean that networking has to slow down at all. In fact, I do a lot of networking through Zoom, and I was doing that before this even started. And that's such a great way to meet people in all sorts of areas across the country, across the world, people that are doing similar things to you. And one of my favorite ways to network with people is to just reach out to them and say, hey, I really love what you're doing. Can we talk about it? Like, can we chat? Let's have a conversation. And you can do that easily through Zoom or through any video conferencing platform. One place I've been really having a great time meeting new people is through Facebook groups, like Hannah mentioned earlier. I'm in several Facebook groups. I specifically work with creative people, like artists and musicians. And so I'm in several Facebook groups for musicians and for artists. And I meet people there all the time, and they're all doing very different things. Some of them are performers, some of them are other types of coaches, and I've had great conversations. One of my favorite ways to network is through podcasting. I have my own podcast. I've had a podcast for several years now, and it's one of the best excuses to have a conversation with someone that might not otherwise really have a conversation with you. So if you ask them to be on your podcast, they're more likely to say yes, and they're more likely to really dive into what they do and give you all of their trade secrets. And it's really, honestly, a great way to network with people, because it's not just a conversation between you two. They also have the benefit of getting their getting publicity for themselves out there. So that's a really great option. I'm all for starting podcasts. I teach my students about podcasting, and it's one of the things that I think a lot of people should really jump on, and it's a great time to start one. And not just that, but even start a mastermind with your peers, and find a group of 10 people or so that you can all have a monthly meeting and talk together, maybe take turns inviting guest speakers, take the initiative to put the conversations together and to make the space for those conversations. And you can do that all from home. You don't need to be face to face. So those are my suggestions, I would say.
So quick question, how do you network through Zoom? Like, when you reach out to, how does that work? Can you explain that to me a little bit?
Well, I mean, I meet people through Facebook groups or through Instagram or through finding them on social media in other ways, even LinkedIn, and then just set up a Zoom call, just like you would set up a coffee, meeting, anything like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the other question, I think, well, the other thing that I wanted to add was, another great way to network is also to do, and something that I was doing beforehand was Airbnb experience host. I was also teaching people how to podcast as an experience host, because people want to learn, and then they come, and then you get people. And I also did that. So people might say, well, I don't want to start a podcast. You can do anything. Like, I also raise butterflies, and people were coming and seeing my butterflies. So there really is no limits to how you can get creative. And you talked about, you're into musicians and bands. You can get into those Facebook groups, and those are great suggestions for networking. So, I think that the sky's the limit, right? It's really all about, you just, and I think it's also important to follow your passion. So, it's not without the realm of possibilities, like speaking to what Hannah was talking about earlier, there's all these different places that you can, do it. And even like in your gigging, those are all great. Even gig economies, like doing those side jobs are really great ways to network also. So those are all great suggestions. So tell me a little bit about some of the work that you do.
Sure. So I teach at Baldwin Wallace music majors as well as other arts majors about branding and developing websites and all sorts of technology, and we do video as well. And I also have a business online where I coach creatives in very similar things. So I work with them to develop their brands, to learn how to use social media more effectively, especially as artists and musicians. And I host a podcast. I help also manage social media accounts for a couple people. So actually you're catching me at the time right as I'm switching the name of my podcast. So it was called Fan Finder Podcast, and I'm transitioning over to calling it Creative Brand Sessions, because I'm sort of expanding my audience a little bit. But yeah, so I've been helping people to build their websites and develop their brands as well. So many creative people, they want to be better at promoting themselves, but they have a hard time understanding that it's not, self-centered or bragging or narcissistic to really promote yourself online. And so that's something that I help people with, is just getting through that hurdle of, it's okay to talk about yourself. In fact, it's really crucial to talk about yourself and to be able to do that well. And I help them to develop that message and understand how to actually communicate that so that they are targeting the right people with their promotion.
And what are some things that you think that would be good for people in terms of branding themselves in this new environment? What are some things that you think that would really help them be more desirable in terms of the things that people are looking for in brands?
It really, it depends on your field, but I would say like the three C's that I really focus on: clarity, consistency, and collateral. So clarity, meaning you really need to know how to say your impact, how to share your message, how to understand, like, to communicate your identity. And it needs to be clear and understood. And just like what Tim was saying about keywords and understanding what are people looking for and how do I kind of like use that same language. Consistency is also super important. So you need to be consistent with when you show up, how you show up, and what you're saying. And that seems like pretty obvious, but I think you can't just expect that you're going to post on social media once a week and that's it. Like, you have to really be present in those platforms. And then collateral is the one that people don't quite maybe think about, but that's really making sure that things look polished and are professional and that your visual materials match your messaging, right? Because it is sometimes hard to accept, but it's a visual platform, right? We need to make sure that our pictures aren't grainy and our videos aren't, lagging and all of that kind of thing. Like, we need to make sure that we're putting out professional, good looking content, as well as making sure that it's clear and consistent and all of that. So that's kind of it doesn't matter what field you're in, all three of those things matter.
Right. Okay, so Tim, maybe you could tell us, like, what are some skills that people can develop in this new reality? I mean, is there something in particular in terms of, ability that people can work on? So, for example, growth, development. What are some things that people can work on regardless of where they are in terms of the job search, or whether they're afraid that they might lose their job, or they are, they haven't even had a chance to get into the job market because everything's kind of in a holding pattern in a lot of areas. And, now, as we discussed, there's all these new gaps, right? So what are some like real skills that, we did talk about when we were doing the keynote presentation, we did talk about, we're looking for people who are going to be tech savvy, but maybe we can drill down a little bit more. That's what skills are important in this new reality, and also how we can go about cultivating them, if you had some suggestions, Tim.
Sure. So no matter the technology platform that's used, the time we're in has put a strong and renewed emphasis on being a skilled written communicator and also a skilled presenter. We are all talking to each other in meetings. We are all on camera. We are all ready for our close-up, or we have to be ready for our close-up these days. So the presence that you have, your ability to communicate effectively, but also succinctly. With Zoom calls, it does change the way we meet. It gives us the opportunity to meet a little bit more efficiently. So meetings that can tend to drag on and on and on, and we've all been there. That sometimes happens in a Zoom meeting, but it's not the most productive use of time. So developing those written communication skills is important. Learning how to communicate something complex in a very succinct way is so key, because we're communicating with each other via a Basecamp message or Microsoft Teams message. And we are inundated with information and emails so much that how do you get to the heart of the matter quickly? So tightening up those writing skills, developing your presentation skills, but also being incredibly organized, whatever that means for you. If you are, I am that person who has folders with subfolders with, I'm that person, and I color code, whatever that looks like for you. But with all of the information that's coming at us from so many directions, being able to stay on top of things is key. And of course, time management. And that usually when we talk about time management, it's in the context of being a self-starter and having strong self-discipline. But it's also about self-care and knowing how to take care of yourself so that you don't get burned out. It doesn't seem like there's a clock anymore. It doesn't seem like there's a calendar.
It's so weird.
Right?
Like, what time is it? Right?
Right. So set yourself up for success and managing time that not only helps you do your job, but helps you be well when you're not working, so that you can do an even better job. It could be something as simple as blocking out task time on your calendar. If you have a project due, treat it like a meeting. Put it on your calendar so no one can schedule something at that time. And that's when you work on it, and being a guardian of your shared calendar. So communication, presentation, and organization are key, no matter which tech platform you're using.
And I want to speak to what you had said earlier about people. A lot of times we write something and we think that people understand what we're writing, and that speaks to when we were talking about the LinkedIn, like we think people understand what this word means, and that's the same thing when you talk about the communications. It's like you can't just respond to an email and just assume, oh, I'm speaking to this line of your email here. You really have to be clear so that people can figure it out the first time. And if you're going to be taking excessive amounts of time and also you're wasting people's time, people are going to be less likely to want to continue working with you. So you want to really also, before you send out that communication, is really like read it as if you have no context to it. And it should be extremely clear. Like you said, being able to craft that, being succinct, but being specific so people can grasp that message the first time, I think is crucial. Another thing that I want to kind of, talk more about is the thing that you mentioned, is those communication skills. And I think that, and not to stereotype at all, but I think let's just say in general, I think some people struggled with that in the past, and maybe they were able to get away with that. And you can't anymore. You really have to up your people skills, because you no longer have the opportunity to do that in person, to hang out at the bar afterwards, to develop some of those, get on the kickball team of your company. You got to bring it right here, right now. You got to really have a presence, and it's not easy to do, and certainly it takes practice. Are there places that people can go to practice that or get feedback, or do they have coaches, or where can some people go to get some feedback on their level of ability in those areas?
So there are a wealth of coaches and consultants out there, and several independent contractors developed side hustles during this time where they became video conference consultants, where they either helped a enterprise establish a Zoom, infrastructure, so the right tech in place to support it, but then also working individually, doing coaching to help people develop those skills. So there are consultants out there, but something you could do is just record yourself. It's always good to hear what your voice sounds like. Nobody likes what their own voice sounds like, myself included. But see how you present, see how you look on camera, see what your challenges are, and develop a plan to, anything that you don't like, develop a plan to tackle. Now, there Toastmasters and groups like that have always provided continuing education and professional development opportunities in this area. Get involved, because they're all working on Zoom right now. If you go to meetup.com or use the Meetup app, so many of those social groups have continued to meet, but in a Zoom format. So use those opportunities as a chance to practice what your video conferencing presentation skills are like. And that'll help you do a better job when you have to, share an agenda item at a stand-up meeting when you have 250 people on the call watching you. So the more you use it, the better at it you'll be. And then if you really find that you want to improve to a certain level, or there is something that has been challenging to you, you could look at reaching out to one of those coaches or consultants. But I would start with viewing a recording of yourself first and move up from there.
Yeah. And you can even ask a friend, like, hey, I'm getting ready to do an interview online. Can you please do a little Zoom meeting? Can we do, like we used to tell people, do role play. You can do role play on the Zoom as well, and then record that and then play it back, and then cringe at the things you did cringe, and realize what you were really good at flexing, and like take those strengths and keep working on those strengths, and then take those areas of improvement and work on them. Those are excellent suggestions. Thank you. So Hannah, there's I kind of I prepared you guys a little bit with some of the outline of the things that we're going to be talking about here today. And one of the applications, or one of the resources, these new resources that are out there that I had mentioned to you guys, there is actually an app out there for everyone who is listening on the stream here today, and those of you who are attending in the GoTo, and those of you who are following along in the other platforms that we are on here today, and YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. So Hannah, one of the apps that I had mentioned to you guys, there's actually an app called the Coronavirus Helping and Hiring app, right? So what are some other places, Hannah, that someone can go to, some of those new websites, some of those new apps, some of those new platforms perhaps that are offering, some, advice, direction, resources that are new, that have cropped up? What are some of those things that maybe you can talk to us a little bit about?
Sure. So before we get into some of the more tangible websites, I'll always say that, never underestimate the power of your network. Some of the best advice I got at the start of this whole thing was from my supervisor, Lacey, who said, make a list of all of your contacts and who are some people you've been meaning to reach out to that you just haven't for whatever reason, and try to contact one a day. And if you're super busy, try one a week. Touch base. And especially, if you have time, if you're interested in finding a new job, if there's a contact you met outside of work, set up an informational interview. They might have some great tips on how to get your foot in the door, especially in this environment. So never forget about the people in your network that you could reach out to ask for help. As far as other types of resources that you can turn to, some things that I found, actually a lot of the big powerhouse career websites like Indeed.com, Monster.com, they have a lot of portals now where they talk about organizations that are still hiring, that are looking for employees. They talk about interview tips. So if you're somebody who hasn't had to search for a job in a long time and maybe haven't interviewed for a while, you might want to brush up on some of those skills. So taking advantage of those types of courses, of those types of articles are really helpful as well. And then also, looking as far as, doing a self-audit. So you have your resume, right, with all of these skills. If you're looking up job descriptions, like Tim mentioned earlier, you should be perfect for it, but you're not showing up. If you've identified the gaps and the keywords, maybe there's a skill you just haven't brushed up on in a while, or maybe you don't have a lot of experience, or maybe you've been meaning to get certified in something, but haven't got that badge yet to put on your LinkedIn profile. You can take advantage of a lot of different websites out there to learn and educate yourself in this time. Things like Coursera.com, there's ClassCentral.com, there's Lynda.com, Lynda with a Y, where you can sign up for courses for free to learn about different technologies, to earn certifications, to really beef up your resume and your skills as well. So those are just some of the things that I would recommend, especially if you are on the hunt. Also, again, just to reiterate what's already been said, learn what's going on in your industry, what's sort of expected. And if you are in a job that's showing that there might not be hiring back, you're not essential, are there skills you have that could be transferred to another job? One example is, I think of, teachers, right? If we're in an online format, they might have to be furloughed or laid off, unfortunately. But teachers are people. Person people, right? They can talk really well in front of people. They're really passionate about education. So could they work in a development role or a nonprofit where they have knowledge about education? Maybe they're not in front of students, but they could help in a different way in another industry. So take stock of yourself about what are some things you're really good at that might be transferable to another role you're interested in.
Those are all great suggestions. One comment, I didn't even know Monster was still around. I didn't realize Monster was still out there. But it's really great that, platforms like that, and like Indeed, which I am familiar with, you talked about, they're helping people with their interview skills. That's wonderful that's there. And I love that you mentioned Coursera, so many great programs there. And also, Modern Museum of Art is offering free courses, and there's so many other places like Fender was offering, free guitar lessons. So, a lot, I believe Adobe was like selling their stuff for like way cheaper than it normally would be. So yeah, I think there's also this benevolence around a lot of these companies. They're like, we want to help, and that's the really great thing about it, is that people, like you said, are showing up as well. So we need to also show up for ourselves in that way. So we're seeing big companies do it, we need to do it for ourselves as well. One question I want to ask as a follow-up, when you talked about networking, like because your network is your net worth. That's a saying that we should all kind of always keep that in mind. And I love, putting down that list and, getting in contact. So would you recommend that people call? Do they email? What do you think is a preferred method in today's new reality as to how to reach out to that network?
Sure. I think it all just depends on the relationship. So if you had mainly an email communicative relationship, email might be best. If you know them on a deeper level and you've shared a cell phone number, even texting them I think is fine. It really just depends on what you're comfortable with. If it's somebody who you haven't reached out to for a while, maybe you're just LinkedIn friends, right? LinkedIn might be the way to start. And also you'll learn a lot about your network, right? Maybe there's a lot of people that you've connected with but never followed up with, so they don't follow up with you. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of, okay, there might be some gaps now. Are there other people I can connect with? So again, just based on what you're comfortable with. For me, sometimes I'm on Zoom or MS Team Video all day, so I prefer a phone call at the end of the day if I'm just having a casual conversation or doing an informational interview. So don't be afraid of variety as well. I even had friends just write me letters in the mail that I haven't heard from in a long time because they just wanted a different medium. So it really just depends on what you're comfortable with and also how quickly you would like a response.
Those are great tips. And I also sometimes people have hesitation around I can't ask them for help, but people never feel bothered by that. So, especially if it's your network, right? People want to help others, and also when we help people, going down the line, maybe one day they need help, so we open it up to where they can also ask us for help. So you want to keep creating this. So don't be afraid to ask people for help. But I love that tip around how close you are, what the preferred method of communication is, and also just that variety. Those are all great tips. Thank you. So Hannah, Megan, you're kind of, you talked a little bit about some of those best practices around, the 3 C's. But how about, how can we really stand out, right, in this new reality? What are some risks that people might want to take, Megan, in this new reality around, being able to, stand out amongst that sea of, digital crowd. So maybe you can give us some suggestions of maybe off, really like left field, even maybe a little bit crazy things that might work in this new reality. Do you have anything to share around that, Megan?
I mean, I think really what's most important is to be yourself, and to make sure that when you are promoting your work, that you're also involving your audience along the ride. I think like one of the things that I really focus on that maybe is kind of out of left field is more about making social media community based, right? Instead of just a place for you to kind of like spout out information and like, a lot of times treating social media like a bulletin board where you're just kind of like, here's what's going on, here's what's going on, here's what's going on, that kind of thing. That's the norm, really. And what you could do to kind of shift that a little bit and change it up is to really make it more about other people and while you're promoting yourself, you're also involving your audience. And I don't know if that's like sad that that's out of left field, but it kind of is. Like people use social media a lot to just sort of like spew information.
Yeah.
And so creating conversation is the number one way to really get people to want to connect with you. I'll see more uptick in engagement when I'm talking about other people, because I think it's just like people want to feel like they might talk about me next, or I might be a part of this, or and everyone when they're being shared, like if someone shares me on their profile, I'm going to probably share that post to my profile, and that really spreads the conversation to more people, because now you're reaching my friends, right? So I think one of the ways that you can really stand out is just by taking a step back a little bit and helping to uplift like your whole community and your whole audience. And that's a really really beneficial way of building a community, especially on social media.
So I want to marry that with something that Hannah had said, where you take your list of your network and then use what you just said, go to their social medias or their LinkedIn and say something like, oh, I'm just so happy about this person and their accomplishments. And that's a good way to contact your network where you're not necessarily feeling like you're doing an ask, right? You're doing a give first. So that could be a really great way to combine a lot of that to where, you're standing out, but you're also kind of networking at the same time. I think that's excellent. One of the things that our team did, I actually, one of the few times I copied someone, but our Short North, our theater troupe here, our local theater troupe, obviously the performances were canceled and they were looking for a way to continue to engage people who were interested in the actors. So what they did was they created a video brackets competition. They were using Brackets Ninja, and you would watch the video of them doing a performance, and then you would vote on that performance, and whoever won, would get a pile of money based on the donations. And I loved that. That's was something that I thought was I'd never seen before. And it's a fairly inexpensive way to set it up too with that platform, and I have no stock in that platform whatsoever. So we did the same thing. We had our student staff do videos of how they have pivoted in this new reality, and we put them up against each other at random, and then going through, and now we're in the semifinals, I believe. And same thing, people would donate, and that's part of their scholarship fund. So I think that there's lots of great ways to do that, but I love the idea of doing that engagement, spending that time, and maybe even speaking to what Tim said, in terms of taking that, putting it on your calendar, like during this time of my day of my calendar, I am going to network by lifting up other people and talking about them and their accomplishments on my platforms. I think that's a really great, like taking all of those suggestions that you guys talked about and really putting them together in a way that could be just like one of the great suggestions of putting all three of your minds together. That could be a really great way for people to do that. Okay, so just kind of curious, maybe as we come up on the hour, and we'll open it up after 2 o'clock. The official time for this to end will be 2, and then if people want to hang out to talk some more. But talking about building a personal brand, is something that is always thrown around. But maybe if you guys could share, when was that moment where you decided or knew or felt confident in moving forward with your brand? Or like, when was that time where you're just like, okay, I know who I am, this is who I am? Or maybe it isn't the case, but when did you kind of have that time, or how did you discover yourself? Maybe just kind of like a personal anecdote about that experience for you, Megan, if you wouldn't mind sharing that. I think that would be a good way for people to be inspired, because obviously you know what you're talking about. You guys all know what you're talking about. Very impressed today, and I really appreciate all the information that you guys have shared with everyone. I know it's extremely valuable. We're going to package everything that we talked about here today. It'll be it'll be a show that we're going to be putting together, so people have the opportunity to hear some more. But maybe you could share something personal here in terms of your personal brand.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, it's an ongoing process. I mean, a personal brand is like, I know I was looking at Hannah and Tim when you asked that, and we're all like, should we know the answer? I don't know that there was one moment where I realized that, oh, I have arrived, right? I mean, it's just always going to be developing. Personal brand has the word personal in it. I mean, we all evolve as humans, so we're constantly, I think one thing to remember is a brand, it's kind of like climate versus the weather, right? It shouldn't be changing every single day, but it does, change over time. And there's long trends that evolve and everything. So that's important to know. I think one thing when I finally kind of realized, and I graduated college in 2008, and it was right as, the economy kind of took a downturn, and I was, majoring in arts management, and nonprofit jobs were very, very hard to find. And so one thing that I did was I went back to school, and I studied music in undergrad, but then after that I studied recording because I always loved technology. And I was like, well, if I can sort of bridge two different interests, that makes me a little bit more specific, right? Now I am a classically trained musician who knows how to record you, right? So that's specific. And then after that, I went back to school again and got my master's. And every time I got a little bit more experience, I narrowed down my niche a little bit. And now my very unique overlapping skills make me somebody that is hireable and different. And that is my brand. Now I have technology, I have music, I have branding and social media, and all of those things combined together make me very specific. So I think really, as you gain experience, you start to, it seems kind of opposite, but the more experience you have, the more specific you get, right? So that's kind of my approach, is just, and I started learning how to talk about it. I realized like, okay, I have this knowledge in the area of how to promote yourself. And I also have knowledge of what it feels like to be an artist. And a lot of artists don't know how to promote themselves. So now I'm this person that can help them, right? Because I can speak their language, but I can also help them and fill that gap of understanding about promotion and marketing. So I think really just continue experimenting and learning and getting experience. And even if you're not able to get a job right now, like what Hannah said, like innovate, create stuff, create digital products, like write an ebook, write an e-course, figure out what your gap that you're filling is, and start creating work for yourself in that area. People are always looking for help, especially online. And, there's so many potential clients out there that might really need what you can offer. So, just I think understanding where your expertise lies, and that's something that comes with experience. So, just keep looking for experience and education.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you said climate versus weather. I think that's a great
Right.
takeaway, and I really appreciate you sharing, how when you graduated, it was during that downturn, and how you took, classically trained with being able to record, and that was just, I think that's very inspirational for everyone. So thank you for sharing that. Hannah, how about you share us your personal branding story?
Sure. So I'm definitely going to have some similarities, even if it's in different focuses from Megan. But for me, a lot of my personal brand identification has come from feedback given by other people. What I've taken in, getting feedback from previous supervisors, from colleagues, from different experiences I've been a part of. You know, people would say, "You're just so on top of things," or "You're just so organized," and that's something that I didn't realize was being taken away from how I work. And that's something about personal brands in general. You know, it's not just your resume and your cover letter, it's everything you're putting out there, you know, the actions that you're taking when working and communicating with people. It's the social media you have online. And so for me, what I found is, you know, I'm more of an introvert, but I actually find that I involve myself in a lot of extroverted activities where I'm here doing a panel discussion, right? That's something that, you know, might conflict with me sometimes, but I enjoy pushing myself and challenging myself to find different opportunities because, you know, another part of me is that I realize the importance of being open-minded and having different experiences, learning from different people to keep an open mind so that I can be more creative down the road because in all of the roles I've had up to this point, there's been some element of helping people, whether it's been, you know, coordinating events and concerts for the conservatory community outreach, or working for the registration of records, getting students registered for classes, or now in LaunchNet where I serve entrepreneurs. So how can I get them connected to resources? So that's always been a constant within my brand. So if I feel like I'm not helping somebody or delivering something that I promised I would, that's something that I kind of use as a personal marker, like, okay, this is what I said I was going to do. This is what I'm trying to achieve. Am I still not, you know, keeping pace with that? Or what are some ways that I can improve upon how to assist people? Are there other opportunities I haven't checked out or other things I haven't tried so that I can help people successfully? So definitely been an ongoing process. I think as long as I always have a hand in helping people in some capacity, that's going to stay true to me. I don't know where I'll end up from here because I really enjoy the work that I do by helping entrepreneurs, but that is definitely something that's just having that self-awareness, taking stock of yourself, and really listening when getting feedback from others, because there could be some things you're putting out there, good or bad, that you didn't know you were doing. So it's important to accept the good and the constructive feedback so you can make adjustments and make sure you're achieving what you're trying to do. And again, you know, we talked about consistency earlier, so making sure that, you know, how you communicate, that actions you're taking are all aligning with the goals and the brand that you're trying to portray.
And you know, that's something especially too when you're trying to figure out what that is. Like what you said, you keep hearing people saying, "Hey, you're so good on top of things." Like you'll listen for those cues that people are giving you. If you're really kind of searching, that's the thing. Like, let me go out in the world and let me just really listen to what people are saying and take that in and say, "Hey, maybe I do have this ability, and maybe I can experiment in some of the ways that Megan had mentioned, you know, oh, I really love, you know, these stories that you put out, you know, maybe write an ebook, you know." So I think that's really great because sometimes when you don't see it, other people do. And if you just open yourself up to hear that message, to listen to that, that could be a great way to, you know, find that personal brand. So that was really great. Tim, did you ever have that aha moment that, hey, this is who I am, I'm a digital marketing guru, like that, you know, that day that you've arrived? Did you ever have that moment yourself, Tim?
Well, I mean, to piggyback off Megan, it's an ongoing process and an evolution, and I think I'm in the middle of an evolution right now as we speak. But I think it's important to check in with yourself and look at where you have strengths that are not necessarily tied to your professional background. I have a degree, an undergrad degree in journalism, and started working as a copywriter and fell into marketing roles where I was responsible for digital tools. So as social media started to emerge, as more digital tactics started to take over the marketing unit of an organization, I found myself in the position of being the teacher and the trainer, helping my colleagues and leadership of the organization understand what these tools were and how they could be of value to us, how they could help us grow. And in that, I think it sort of woke up my inner educator and started looking for
Mm.
opportunities that had some sort of training and teaching component. I leveraged my network, as Hannah mentioned, when I thought that maybe I could look into teaching adjunct at some capacity, and found a great opportunity. For 3 years, I worked as a full-time marketer and then taught one course on the side. An opportunity made itself available where I was able to flip that. So my full-time job is on a college campus, but I still consult on the side. So for me, it was just learning about this passion that I have for teaching and helping other people connect the dots and learn. And recently, I've started to see how many parallels there are between digital marketing and educational technology. So setting up an online course to help somebody learn something, to help somebody do something they weren't able to do before, I'm borrowing from the skill set I use to create web content that moves a customer to conversion. And I've really started to look into the educational technology and instructional design space, and have volunteered for some initiatives on campus to help work with faculty. So that's something new that I'm experiencing right now. Who knows where it will lead? But it was learning to check in with myself about, hey, I think there's something here that I really like about this work. How can I do more of that? And who in my network can help me do more of it?
That's awesome. That's really great. I love that you're sharing that, like you said, it's evolving and that you're just now going into it, into a new realm. So it's the possibilities are endless, right? So speaking of endless, we've come to the end of our formal part of our program here today. I cannot thank you guys enough. Like, I myself feel rejuvenated. I know that I'm going to leave here with lots of tools and suggestions for people moving forward. And even myself, like, I'm thinking to myself, what's something I could do additionally, even more. So I think that you guys have really we put together something really valuable and useful, and I cannot thank you guys enough. So for those of you who are here who would like to ask a question, does anyone have those of you who are here attending the go-to meeting here today, does anyone have a question for any of our panelists? If you do, please just unmute yourself, and then when you start talking, your image will pop up, but they can still hear your question. So does anyone have a question here for Tim or Megan or Hannah? Please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask that question. Or you can put it in the chat box if you like. Any questions from the audience? Okay. Tim, any final words?
Just everyone take care of yourself, whatever that means, professionally, personally, take care of your health, and try to walk away from this recording thinking about what were some takeaways that you can immediately put into place. Review Megan's 3 C's and see how they apply to you. Look at your network like Hannah suggested, and just try to, as you pursue these opportunities, really make use of them. Don't just consume the information, make use of what you're learning.
Okay. Hannah, did you have any final words?
Sure. I'll just, on top of what Tim has already said, just recognize that whether you are pursuing, looking for a new job or a career change, just recognize it's a process, right? You have to do some self-discovery, whether it's taking your own stock of, what you've done, what your skills are, what you'd like to improve on, or asking others, supervisors, colleagues, friends, family about, what they think you're good at. So, while this is an uncertain time, don't be bogged down. It will take time, but if you put the time and effort into it, I think you'll be surprised about what you learn about yourself and what opportunities could be there for you. So, don't also dismiss opportunities. If someone comes to you asking for help, jump on, don't be afraid, and don't try to make everything perfect. Sometimes we wait to start something because we want it to be absolutely perfect the second it goes live. And while, yes, polish is important, talking about collateral, making sure your messaging is clear, just try something and don't be afraid to fail. It might take a couple of tries before you get it right, but you're going to learn from that experience. And as long as you take away from what you've learned, that's the most important thing.
True. Megan, any final words?
Yeah, sure. I totally agree with what Hannah and Tim said, and thank you again for having me and for having us on for this conversation. I think one of the main things that I hope everyone leaves with is just that innovation is really all about adaptability and optimism, in my opinion. And I think keeping both of those things in mind and just remembering that this is a chance to find a silver lining and to really explore some new ideas and try and stay open-minded and optimistic about all of it. And also, one of the best things you can do if you're sort of frozen, you don't know where to start, is to educate. So find a course, like Hannah was saying, find a free resource online and learn something new, because it might inspire you in some way. So that would be my suggestion. Stay positive.
Thank you. Yeah, that silver lining is really, really important for us to keep in mind. And again, thank you everyone for joining us here today. I want to thank Megan, our branding strategies coach, Hannah, again, a leader from LaunchNet, and Tim Marshall, the director at the Digital Marketing Clinic. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. My name is Ria Dark, and please feel free to message me if you'd like a recording of this for yourselves or for your students or for any other platform. We'll certainly be distributing it wisely. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Look for those silver linings. Thank you. My name is Ria Dark. Have a great day.
Hi. Thank you for joining us at UInc. My name is Ria Greif, and I'm here with you today, as I am every week, to help build the most important brand in your life, which is...